So a Perez pole was out of the question after Saturday's qualifying session got away from the Mexican driver at his home Grand Prix. But it didn't go well for his teammate Max Verstappen either, as the Drivers' World Championship leader could only sit behind 2 silver arrows going into Sunday's race. Yes, there was plenty to get into in terms of qualifying, of what happened and the fallout as well. So stick with us here at GP Fans right now and throughout this season by hitting the subscribe button down below to stay up to date with everything that we do here at the channel. But there's a big qualifying session to recap from the Mexico Grand Prix. Let's get into our recap and some of the fallout from Saturday's session. Q1 started with Lance Stroll getting all in a spin, sending his Aston Martin into the barriers at the last corner with 11 minutes to go in the first session. Red flags were waved while the cleanup began, as Red Bull used the time to work on some problematic rear wings that had required some attention before qualifying. Stroll's slip-up meant very little to his grid position, with the Aston Martin driver already starting from the back of the grid thanks to engine penalties announced before the session. This was the case for Yuki Tsunoda as well in the AlphaTauri, while George Russell's Williams faced a 5-place grid penalty for Sunday after a gearbox change. The Alpine of Fernando Alonso, along with Nicholas Latifi in the Williams, joined the Haas pair of Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, along with Stroll in missing out on Q2. Medium tyres were the order of the day for every driver in Q2, as everybody tried to get into Q3 on the yellow stripe tyres to start the race, as the track continued to improve in the heat of Mexico. While Verstappen led the initial runs, it was Hamilton who went quickest on the timing board going into Q3, with Sebastian Vettel, the Alfa Romeos of Kimi Raikkonen, Antonio Giovinazzi, George Russell and Esteban Ocon failing to make the final session. So the top 10 shootout had all eyes on the Red Bull and Mercedes men, and it was Valtteri Bottas who topped the timing charts after the initial runs. It was hinted at on Friday that perhaps Mercedes had a little something extra in terms of their pace on the soft tyres, but with the Finn going 0.35 seconds faster than Max Verstappen in third, and Lewis Hamilton 0.145 seconds slower than his teammate, Red Bull and the rest of Mexico City were in shock at the gap between the leading 2 constructors. With gaffer tape shown on the rear wing of the Red Bull before the final runs in Q3, was there a chance that perhaps Christian Horner's team had to do a little bit of a cowboy builder's job to try and get their car ready for qualifying? The final runs saw the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc giving an unintentional tow to Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen, who were behind him, but neither Red Bull could keep their car under control. The Mexican driver got caught out with struggling Yuki Tsunoda, who ran wide midway through the lap, with Perez following suit whilst Verstappen had to lift, seeing the pair running off into the dust and grass. With their rivals' times completely screwed for the final runs, the only question was, would Bottas hold on against Hamilton, with the 7-time world champion unable to pip his teammate to pole, but helping to lock out a front row for the Silver Arrows on Sunday, being led by the soon-to-be Alfa Romeo driver. So the Mercedes pair of Bottas and Hamilton hit the front row surprisingly to start Sunday's Mexico Grand Prix, with Verstappen and Perez making up the second row. Pierre Gasly and Carlos Sainz are behind them, with Danny Ricciardo, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris and Sebastian Vettel making up the top 10 for Sunday, as Yuki Tsunoda, although in Q3, runs towards the back of the grid after those engine penalties. Max Verstappen, though, isn't too downhearted, and that's because Max Verstappen believes third is still better than starting second for Sunday's Mexican Grand Prix, after the World Championship leader was forced to pull out of his final flying lap in Q3 of Saturday's qualifying session. The Dutch driver was behind the 2 Mercedes of title rival Lewis Hamilton and eventual pole sitter Valtteri Bottas going into the final runs of the top 10 shootout. But there was still plenty of expectation that the Red Bull driver should have been able to take pole on a track traditionally favoured by Red Bull. But midway through the final runs, a problem for Yuki Tsunoda ahead in the AlphaTauri caused a momentary lapse for Verstappen's tow partner and teammate Checo Perez, causing the Mexican driver to lift and go wide off at his home circuit and bail onto the grass. The knock-on effect was that Max behind the pair was forced to lift too, and therefore ruin his final lap time. He was worried that perhaps there had been an incident ahead and that maybe yellow flags were going to come out. Either way, Q3 was ruined then for the Dutchman, and he had to settle for third behind the two Mercedes. Through qualifying, the balance went away a little bit, but then actually in the last lap, I was on for a good lap, but then I don't know what happened in front of me, but there was two guys going off, so I thought, you know, there was going to be a yellow flag. So I backed out, but the lap, of course, is destroyed, lamented Verstappen when talking through qualifying with Jenson Button. Even, you know, with that, having a great balance, I think we could have gone for that pole lap, but of course, third is not amazing, but I think it's still better than starting second. Verstappen might be thinking about the long run down to turn 1 with the slipstream of the two Mercedes ahead of him at the start of tomorrow's race, and perhaps the opportunities that might bring him, and he didn't seem too perturbed by the talk of what looked like gaffer tape holding together part of the Red Bull's wing during the qualifying session. We had to repair them, the rear wings, but I think in the end when we went into qualifying everything was like normal. It's not ideal, but I don't think it's the reason why it was a bit of a struggle for us in qualifying. Qualifying didn't go our way, but we're not using these tyres anyway tomorrow, so it's still a lot to fight for. So Verstappen seems really upbeat about what could happen in Sunday's race. Heartbreak though for Checo Perez after all of the talk about him potentially winning at his home Grand Prix, but having a very frustrating Saturday in the qualifying session and only coming up in 4th place. And how good do Mercedes feel right now? 1 and 2 locking out the front row of the grid. They have track position going into Sunday's all-important race, a race that many think could be a huge deciding factor in the Drivers' and Constructors' World Championship this season. What are your thoughts on Saturday's qualifying session? Who had the most impressive session? I know we've only focused mainly on the top 4 in this video, but there was plenty going on further down as well on the grid, and that'll all play out in Sunday's race. Let us know your thoughts in that comment section below, and hit subscribe to stay up to date with all that we do, including the recap of Sunday's race as well, here with GP Fans.